immunity clearly wanes, and it wanes very quickly. And so those clinical results, they are what they are. The monoclonal results have been very, very good, and in the real world and in the clinical trial. So our hope is that this performs in line with that. Now, this is not the same as what we've been doing with monoclonal, where you get infected and then you go in and do the monoclonal site, or you've been exposed and you're high risk to potential infection, and you can go in and use it for post-exposure prophylaxis. This is for people who have not been exposed to COVID and who have not been infected by COVID. And so it's something that you're trying to provide some antibody protection for about a 6-month period of time. So the people that are specifically authorized to do the Evusheld are individuals who are immunocompromised and may not have adequate immune response to vaccination. And you see that with certain cancer patients, transplant recipients. You also have this as an availability for people who have a history of severe adverse reactions to vaccinations, and you do have those people. When we were trying to provide, and we did provide protections for people against forced vaccinations, one of our things I kept saying is, there's some people who are advised against doing this based on their health circumstances. And so those are the types of people here, if they want to do this new product, they're going to have the ability to do that. So in terms of treatments now in Florida, you're going to you get infected with COVID and you meet the criteria where you're at higher risk for hospitalization, you could go and do a traditional monoclonal antibody therapy, Regeneron, Sotrovimab, and the like. If you've been exposed and you fall into that category, you can do those same monoclonals. But if you're somebody in those other high-risk categories where you do it not having any exposure to COVID, not being infected, doing it to provide some long-lasting protection, this is now filling that particular niche. And so, because you think about it, if you're somebody that is a transplant patient and, the vaccine isn't recommended for you, then to wait till you get infected and treat it, the treatment has been good, but you could do this before you're ever exposed, and potentially it will mediate any infection that you get. So, and it is not authorized for post-exposure prevention. So I just want to make people clear about that. It's really a preventative for folks who fall into those categories. And it's not vaccinated or not. I mean, there are a lot of people who fall into those immunocompromised who did get vaccinated, but their bodies just didn't mount a sufficient immune response. So they would be eligible as well. So initially, we have a very limited allocation. It's about 3,100 doses. And this initial allocation is going to go to hospitals and clinics that are already administering monoclonal antibody treatment to patients, including right here in Ocala. And the way we tried to allocate it was just say, okay, can we get it within a 2-hour drive of everyone in the state of Florida? It's easier to do that in some areas than others, but that's what we've been able to do. So you have some folks that are maybe in more rural areas. We can't make it next door with such a limited amount, but if you get in the car, do this. This is a pretty significant thing to do, so we feel that it would probably still be worth it for some folks to do it. So that's how we've tried to get it going in the interim. So we have all the locations that administer this, not just the new AstraZeneca product, but also the Regeneron and the Sotrovimab. And you can go to floridahealthcovid19.gov, and it will have all those sites located. You can go in, you can make appointments, you can do what you need to do, but I think this is a positive development to be able to have this, especially given that it really will serve a valuable purpose for some of those folks who are at very high risk and do need some additional help. So I also want to thank, and we'll hear from the Surgeon General Joe Latipo here in a minute, but I'm really happy with what he's been doing in terms of the Healthier You initiative that he's doing at the Department of Health. And I think when he became Surgeon General, he made it very clear, that COVID-19 is not the sum total of what it means to be healthy. And I think that was a message that we needed a long time ago. You remember March of 2020, what all the quote experts were telling people to do? They were telling people to don't go to the gym don't exercise, stay home and eat takeout was basically the policy that was coming down from on high. I mean, quite frankly, that was insane to be doing that. And so what Joe has said is, health is a whole bunch of things. Yes, COVID is something that is a part of our lives, unfortunately, but it's not the only thing. And so you want to make sure you're doing things to keep yourself healthy and improve your health. And so that's why we in Florida, I mean, we were very, once we saw how this didn't make sense in April of 2020, we worked really hard to make sure the gyms were open, that people could go out. We always had the recreation. It was something that we thought was very important. And so that's what he's doing. It's a holistic approach to health. And I think it's something that is going to make a really, really big difference. So going forward, this is going to be something that will be here for folks. We do anticipate higher levels, on January 1st, probably higher levels of COVID than November 1st, but this is the seasonal pattern. And what you're seeing in the Midwest and the Northeast, it's almost exactly the same seasonal pattern that they had last year. It's about 3 to 4 weeks behind last year's schedule, but the rise and the peak and everything is happening very similar to what happened then. So we anticipate similar to what we saw in Florida last winter, lower than all those other areas, but higher in January than higher in November. Fortunately, we have the ability to combat it with a variety of these tools. We are not going to indulge in any of the insanity that you see starting to happen again in some of these parts of the country. You have universities in different parts of the country that force every student to do vax, force them to mask, probably force them to booster, and they're still shutting down. It's like, when can you ever operate if that's the case? So a lot of those heavy-handed policies have been total failures, and we're certainly not going to be indulging in that. Unfortunately, I think you will see some of these areas close K through 12 schools this winter. I think that'd be disastrous. I hope it doesn't happen. But when you see kind of how this stuff starts to happen, this is the things that sometimes people do. I talked to Joe Latipo, and he can say something. He can talk about it too, about this Omicron. You hear a lot in the media. It came out of South Africa, and I feel bad. I mean, South Africa reports it, and then people try to start restricting travel with South Africa. That's not a good incentive. You're incentivizing countries to not report and to do. So I think that was really unfortunate. But in South Africa, what you've seen is dramatically lower hospitalizations as a result of Omicron than what you had with the Delta variant in South Africa. And thus far, you have not seen significant hospital admissions as a result of that. And it's early, and I think, the Surgeon General would say it's early, but as of right now, that's just what the data is telling us, that it is not leading to significant hospital admissions compared to Delta. But they're going to be monitoring it, the Department of Health, and see. But at the end of the day, in terms of the approach of making sure people are protected with their jobs and their freedoms and their abilities to make decisions, we're going to make sure we're standing with individuals and making sure that they can do that. So I'm going to have Joe Latipo come up and say a few things both against this about this new monoclonal, then anything else he wants to talk about in terms of healthier you. Where's he at?
My leg fell asleep there. All right. Well, good morning, guys. I'm glad we're not doing this 2 hours from now, because I'm already getting a little bit warm out here. So this is another example of Governor DeSantis's thoughtful leadership, and it's sad that we've had a period of time where there's been so much thoughtlessness. Really, people not actually thinking about the implications of what they're doing. I was just the other day looking at research that, not surprisingly, didn't receive much public attention, but it was a study from McKinsey about how gaps in educational gaps between white and black and brown students widened during the pandemic. And the gaps already existed, but they widened. And of course, why did they widen? It's because people who generally are on the other side of the political spectrum and usually advocate very strongly for racial and ethnic minorities decided to close their schools down, right? and people with the least resources were least able to compensate for those closures. So, so 2 years of a lot of really thoughtless, uninspired decision making in the rest of the country, and fortunately here, thoughtful leadership. So the way that the governor has led and managed this pandemic is the way that every state who actually put their citizens first should have led and managed the pandemic. So he's respected human rights, civil liberties. He's thought about the options that people have and the fact that some people are very open to different types of measures. Some people want to stay home. Some people, for them, it's better to be out and they don't want to stay home because maybe it makes them depressed, or maybe for whatever other reason. Maybe they need to work. Maybe they need to keep their business going. Maybe they need to keep their kids in school. And some people are more inclined toward treatments instead of vaccinations. So in Florida, under the governor's leadership, we've provided all options for people, and we've provided education and access, right? And what have we saved ourselves from? We've saved ourselves from the deep politicization that many other parts of the country are now dealing with because of their choice to instead go the really strong arm route of mandates, and you only can go this way, and we're going to require this measure, and when cases rise or some other indication that we decide merits it, we'll add additional measures to that. So that's a failed strategy. I mean, this example of universities in the Northeast, including some Ivy League universities, telling their students that that they're gonna shut down, and exams are gonna be remote, and people don't even know what's gonna happen in the spring in terms of whether the students are gonna come back. These are the same institutions that were early to mandate the vaccines. They're still mandating masking. They're mandating testing. It's the trifecta, and now they're doing the shutdowns. So it's lunacy, right? And it's not working very clearly. What is working is what we're doing here, which is thinking about sustainability, thinking about flexibility, and thinking about options. In addition to that, we've thought about treatment, and the governor led with treatment. I mean, it's something that's just so basic to clinicians, but somehow, 49 other states couldn't figure out that the right thing to do was to offer vaccines and education, but also offer treatment options for people who became sick. I don't think I'll ever understand why that didn't happen. So the governor's led with that, and this is just a nice extension of that. So this new product is a product that is effective in terms of monoclonal antibody for patients who are immunocompromised, and who, for whatever reason, didn't mount a response to their vaccine or can't receive vaccines because of allergies or other reasons. So the data for it are very compelling. It's effective, and the company is also doing some studies right now to determine whether it also has effectiveness for Omicron. So, this is how you should manage a pandemic. You respect human rights. You respect the freedom of choice. Really important, right? We've got a national agenda, national leadership trying to convince people that they don't get to make choices. That it's their business whether you got a vaccine or not. Someone came up to me yesterday and asked me that question, and I told them I encourage you all to, if you want to share the same response, which is that's my personal health information. So that is a more sustainable, thoughtful pathway and approach to managing a pandemic. So shifting, I'll add one other thing, which is that just a message to our clinicians out there. So last night my office sent out a message because we are in a period where with this Omicron, it's very clear that it's highly transmissible. So far, as the governor said, the data do not indicate any increased risk. If anything, the data seem to support a lower risk of serious illness. We'll know more with time, and hopefully that holds. But either way, because of the increased transmission that's associated with this variant, it's really important that we prepare. So we in Florida are trying to make sure that none of our clinicians are in the same hypnotic state that unfortunately many clinicians around the country are in, where they think that it's appropriate to tell high-risk patients who test positive for COVID-19 to go home and wait and just come back if they get sicker. That's not a Florida approach. So our approach here is treatment. If you're high risk, we want you treated. We want you to know where you can access treatments, and we included messaging about information about treatments and availability of treatments in our communications last night to every licensed medical physician in this state. So I encourage physicians, please treat your patients if they're positive for COVID-19. Forget about the little hypnotic spell that some of our leadership has been casting over the past 2 years. Forget about it. In Florida, we treat patients. That's our expectation, and we'll be looking forward to seeing how well we do with that as we go into what will likely be a period of increased cases. Okay, thanks.
All right. All right, well, thanks so much. And then we have Chad Christensen to come say a few things.
Beautiful day here in Ocala, and very special day to welcome Governor DeSantis as well as Dr. Latipo, here to Ocala Regional Medical Center. It's been an incredible time and kind of an evolution over the course of what has been really 2 years, and I've got a lot of people standing behind me today that have done incredible work over the last 2 years. There's a lot of people out in the crowd that have done incredible work over the course of the last 2 years. And how we connect to our community, how we connect to our patients, and really how do we care for our community during this time, and how do we learn and keep getting better. I think those are the important things that we continue to focus on here at Ocala Health. And just want to recognize a few people who do some of that work. Dr. Sid Clevenger is our head of family care specialist. He runs our primary care offices. Dr. Richard Petrick is our chief of emergency medicine, really kind of led our efforts out of the emergency room. Dr. Anish Khanna really led our hospitalist team and our nursing team kind of through this COVID, period. Then Dr. Dahan from a critical care medicine standpoint. And we're talking about monoclonal antibodies, a little bit today. Part of the evolution for us and how we took care of our community was really onboarding the use of monoclonal antibody treatments in our community. It started as an outpatient, and we actually expanded into our emergency medicine. I want to recognize Ebony McConnell, who really led that effort. We had 5 different emergency rooms that were offering that service. We were able to scale how we were able to provide that kind of health care, that kind of access to that kind of treatment for our community. That was made possible by the executive order that we were able to get to be able to expand that use to more people within our community. We believe that made a difference. As we kind of have gone through this, again, whether it's COVID or whether it's the other things we do here, like trauma services, like comprehensive stroke services, those are the things we have to onboard and really think about. How do we set our teams up to be successful? And it's a responsibility. It's an awesome responsibility and opportunity. And we're very thankful for the opportunity to continue to evolve kind of our treatment for our community, to be able to one of the 21 sites that's able to offer this for our community as we go through this. And I think part of our learning too is we're part of HCA Healthcare. Again, we're one of 49 hospitals across the state. We're one of 185 hospitals across the country. The learnings that we have can get scaled to other places. The learnings that other places have can get scaled to here so that we do the best job for our community. And that's a privilege for us. And I'm very thankful for the leadership that we have at HCA Healthcare. Very thankful for the leadership that I've got standing behind me and out in this crowd. Very thankful for Governor DeSantis and Dr. Latipo and the leadership that we get from the state and the opportunities that we have to provide the best care possible for our community. So really just want to say thank you to all of our team that's here. I want to say thank you to Mark Lander too, who's been an incredible partner of ours from Marion County Health Department. It doesn't always work that way, but he has been a true resource and a partner in providing that care. And I look forward to continuing to care for our community. That's an awesome responsibility, but it's an opportunity that we take on and we're very excited about. Thank you guys for being here today.
Okay, Angela Wells is going to come up and talk about her experience.
So I am Angela Wells. I am a type 1 diabetic, and in addition to that, I am someone who also has adverse reactions to certain elements. Years ago, I was having some health conditions that made me seek after that information, and when I eliminated the things that were causing my reactions, my health issues resolved. So I have also an adverse reaction. At the time, the doctor said, you really need to be careful when you take vaccines. I advise you not to take vaccines because you also have a reaction to an element which is commonly used in vaccines. So when COVID happened, I've really just been struggling with what do I do as a type 1 diabetic and also having adverse reactions. I chose not to take the vaccine because I felt like with my sensitivity I was going to react to it because I had proven already to have that happen. And so I called Moderna and I tried to get them to tell me, whether it was in there, just to kind of do my due diligence to make sure it wasn't something that I could take. They couldn't guarantee me that what I have a reaction to was not in the vaccine, so I didn't take it. So fast forward a little while, I ended up getting COVID, and I was actually in Orlando. Symptoms came on Friday through Sunday. By Sunday morning, my husband took me to a clinic. I tested positive for COVID, and we packed up, came home, called my sister on the way back. Yvette Hall, she works here at ORMC, and she says, Ange, we have this new monoclonal antibody treatment that you need to come to the ER and get. And I was like, okay. So I literally got off I-75, drove straight here. My husband dropped me off 2.5 hours later and came back to get me. And I received the infusion. And I went home. My symptoms did get worse. But at 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I honestly was like, is this real? Is it really over? Because it was like a light switch. The plug had been unplugged and all the symptoms had resolved. And I am still amazed that it happened so quickly. My recovery was shortened. I was able to go back to work in a week after that. But I'm just really thankful for everything that had been done. It was so timely because it had only been available for 2 weeks. I couldn't get it at Advent because you had to have a doctor and it was on a Sunday. And so I don't think I realized all that went into making it happen and making it available. And I really feel lucky that it was available because I feel like it really stopped what was happening and my reaction to COVID. I didn't go into the hospital. I was able to stay at home and quarantine and recover and go right back to work the next week. So I really appreciate what you did. On behalf of us in Florida, I'm glad to be able to give the message.
Thank you. Okay, Matt, you want to
Sure.
come up here?
Thank you, Governor.
Yeah.
Well, good morning. And Dr. Joe, I agree with you. I'm starting to see that little bead of sweat, even though it is December. But hey, we're Floridians. We're used to the heat and the humidity, even though my hair isn't, but we'll survive. I have a unique perspective in all this because I get to spend a lot of time in Washington with colleagues from all over the nation. And I cannot tell you how many times I hear from my colleagues, can you please send your governor to our state? The leadership that we have here in Florida under Ron DeSantis and his entire team, and by team I mean not just his cabinet and our amazing elected officials, but his staff as well. It is unparalleled. It is thoughtful, it is pragmatic, it is common sense, and it has resulted in Florida being one of the lowest COVID cases states in the nation. And so while respecting people's personal rights and the decision for them to either get the vaccine or not, based on conversations with their families, in consultation with their doctors, that has been preserved. And that should be celebrated. I look around here today, and Chad, you guys have done an amazing job. And my heart breaks because around the country we have seen our first responders, law enforcement, our nurses, our doctors, our techs, our health departments, people who dropped everything and answered the call, hailed as heroes at the height of COVID, now under these unconstitutional mandates from small-minded individuals in Washington, are now classifying these very same people as villains. And it is wrong. And so I couldn't be more proud to be here in Florida, where our heroes yesterday are still our heroes today. And with the leadership of Governor DeSantis, they will remain heroes, and Florida will remain free. And this will be based on science, not political science, and that's the way that it should be. And as I was standing here, I was thinking, Governor, Ocala, back in our state's history, was going to be the state capital. And we have some pretty remarkable local elected officials here, and I'm sure they would love to have maybe a second governor's mansion, maybe a vacation home, because Ocala is DeSantis country, and we're so proud of you and your team. And as we go into next week, it is Christmas, and I just think that the best gift that we can give is our continued support for our first responders, our nurses, our doctors, our elected officials who have fought every single day to protect our rights, and to our governor and his team. And as far as us in Washington, we're going to do everything we can to keep the feds off your back and off the backs of all Floridians. You just keep doing what you're doing, Governor. We're so proud of you, and thank you all for being here today.
So on these mandates, obviously, we did a special session last month. We provided substantive protections for Floridians. We think that's important. We know it saved many thousands of jobs, and actually some people got rehired, which we're happy about, and we want people to be able to earn a living without having be subject to mandates. But you have the OSHA mandate that was consolidated in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. That is not a court that is ultimately gonna rule favorably on that. I'm very confident of that. However, they recently ruled that they did not want to entertain the case on the full court. So they have a panel which may not, of 3 judges, which may not be representative of the full court. And so we'll see what happens on that. I mean, I was surprised at that. You could end up with what I would consider an adverse ruling on the panel, and then it maybe goes to the full court, and then the rule is ruled to be unconstitutional. But I'm confident of the ultimate result. How you get there, there was a little bit of a curveball, because the easiest thing I think would have been, okay, this is a significant thing. It affects tens of millions of people potentially. Have the full court hear it, and then I mean, I'm assuming, the Supreme Court would be asked to take it, but quite frankly, I don't think you'd get a different result from the U.S. Supreme Court than you would from the Sixth Circuit. But instead, they're doing the 3-judge panel. Who knows? They could lift the stay on this. I hope not. I'm not predicting that. But it was something that I think didn't need to necessarily go then. They typically don't like doing it on the full court initially on cases. I get it. But this is something that's very significant. So we're watching that. We're happy with our substantive protections that we've put in place, but we also feel that our case has been consolidated there, as is every other case around the country. It is an important matter of principle, even if it ultimately doesn't affect people in Florida, depending on how it comes, because you can't just have these bureaucracies that are running amok. I mean, this is OSHA. This is like employment and workplace, and they're imposing a vaccine mandate on statutory language that was enacted decades ago. That's a huge problem. And if they're able to do it on that, there's going to be other ways where they can weaponize the machinery of government to impose really far-reaching policies that really invade on people's individual freedoms and extend beyond the enumerated powers that have been delegated under the Constitution. So it is very important. We'll see, but people should just be prepared. It is on a 3-judge panel. You could potentially see a hiccup before we ultimately get, which I think will be a favorable decision. Okay, anybody have any questions?
Governor, for a moment about the allegations by the Florida Commissioner on Agriculture. She's alleging that there's fatal play going on in your appointments to university boards.
Okay, you can look up everyone who I've appointed. So we have however many universities, however many state colleges, and you could look to see based on their records, and it's obviously false on its face. It would require probably 20 minutes of investigation to be able to do that. So it's yet another baseless conspiracy charge that gets thrown around, and so it's obviously not true. And I will tell you this: if you look at what we've been able to do with our university system, every year that I've been governor, it's been ranked #1 in the country by U.S. News and World Report. You look at a place like University of Florida, they were like 19th in the country 10 years ago. Now, since I've become governor, they're now 5th in the country for public universities. And so that's something that we're very proud of. And so I think that the vast majority of people, whether I appointed them or didn't appoint them, I think have done a really good job. And so that's just the facts.
Governor, with Omicron spreading rapidly
comparatively in other states, there's also been a surge in demand for testing. What's the state doing to prepare for that demand?
So, well, first of all, I can maybe have Dr. Latipo speak to, this testing and what. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no need if you're healthy to just be running out and getting tested every day. I mean, this is something, it's a tool for somebody that has clinical symptoms to be able to identify, what that is. But the places that require all these testing, we talked about these universities that are requiring it, and they end up having this stuff. So it's not going to have an impact on arresting these types of waves. And so, my sense is that, obviously there's been a lot of CARES Act money for both state and local. I know different local communities in Florida have approached it differently. Some of them have spent a lot of money on testing. Others have recognized that a lot of this is commercially available. So, we'll leave that to those local communities to be able to make those decisions. I'll have Joe come up, but I don't think there's any evidence that mass testing of healthy people has done very much to interrupt any of these seasonal waves.
So we have an evidence-based, rational approach to management because we anticipated that there would be, additional at least increases and possibly surges. And we're seeing some evidence of that in other parts of the country. The science regarding Omicron is actually extremely interesting because it's the velocity with which it becomes the dominant strain is like nothing that we've seen before during this pandemic. Of course, countering that, the good news is so far there's no evidence that it's deadly. So our approach is not actually different from what we've been doing. So we have testing sites and resources in place. We monitor the volume of positive testing. We monitor the volume of overall testing. We make some epidemiological estimates regarding projections with those data. And we encourage clinicians, hospitals, clinics to provide early treatment for high-risk patients. So that's the basis of our approach. I think, as the governor said, it's been completely ridiculous from the beginning, by the way, to go around thinking that you could contain this virus by doing with a testing strategy. And the reason, of course, and we've known this from the beginning, so guys like me were looking around wondering what my colleagues were doing. The reason is that a substantial proportion of people never have symptoms. So when you have a condition where, best estimates are probably 40% of people have no symptoms, and this is in unvaccinated people, the proportion might even be maybe higher in vaccinated people, you can't contain it by running around with swabs trying to, test people. It's not possible. It's going to spread. So managing that is our approach, and the answer about mandates in this state.
Governor, a group of lawmakers just sent you a letter asking for you to declare a state of emergency when it comes to affordable housing because of rising rent costs. Your office said that there's something in your budget that possibly could address it. Do you plan to address that further?
Well, first of all, I think what we should do is we should take that letter and we should forward it to Joe Biden in the White House, because things are more expensive because of his policies. What they did earlier this year, trillions of dollars. You look at all the different things that have gone on that have hurt the supply chain, fuel prices, and then when they did the CDC taking over all these rental properties, that is all contributing to what's happening. So we're happy to forward that letter on to Biden because make no mistake about it, that is what is driving increased costs across the board. Now, in our governor's recommendations, we had, first of all, I think it's great to point out, my governor's budget was $99.7 billion. And to compare that to the state that's closest to us in population, New York State, their budget, even though they have worse roads, worse bridges, worse K-12, worse higher education, their budget's $230 billion with massive taxes and all kinds of other problems. So we have no income tax. We have the lowest per capita tax burden in the country. And at a $99.7 billion for a governor's budget, we have over $15 billion in surplus revenue, both in terms of unallocated general revenue, in terms of the budget stabilization fund, in terms of trust fund, outstanding trust fund balances. That is a huge, huge cushion to be able to have. And so we're doing that in a very strong way, protecting Florida against what may come down the pipe with Biden or anybody else, but we're also doing really significant things. We're increasing teacher pay again. We're doing $1,000 bonuses for teachers and principals and cops and firefighters. We're increasing salaries for state law enforcement by 25%. We're doing $5,000 bonuses for all new law enforcement that come into the state of Florida. And in terms of affordable housing, we have full funding for the Sadowski Trust Fund in my governor's budget. And so if you look from infrastructure to environment to education to law enforcement to all these things, we've been able to do really big things in this budget, but do it in a way that has us sitting on a huge cushion in state revenue. And I think if we were all sitting here in April of 2020, there probably wouldn't be very many people that would have predicted where we'd be where we are. I think most people would think we would have been way worse off than where we are. And so this matters, and we're happy to be addressing the needs of Floridians in a very thoughtful and bold way.
Governor, your reaction to the voter fraud charges out of the villages? I know you say you want to crack down on things like that.
So we want no voter fraud in Florida. We think it's very important that we have a transparent, legal system of voting, and I could just tell you, I think what we've seen around the country, the safest voting is that in-person secret ballot, and you hand it over inside the voting booth and inside the precinct. The more that you have mail ballots floating around into the ether, the greater opportunity, when that leaves the elections officials, the greater opportunity you could have for potential impropriety. That's why in this year I signed a piece of legislation banning ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. I mean, the idea that political operatives should be going around collecting satchels of votes and then dumping them in some place, that is not one person, one vote. That's not a secret ballot, and that's something that I think is very problematic and has been very problematic in other states. So we don't have any tolerance for that. What we're seeking to do in this next legislative session is increase penalties for ballot harvesting, increase penalties for people who are using fraudulent identities to be able to go in and obtain a ballot. We're also going to be having ID as part of the absentee ballot request process. I think it's very important that you have to show that you actually live in Florida still. I mean, we're a transient state. You'll have people that haven't lived here, and they're going to still get a ballot. That's not the way we want to be able to do. So, and then finally, we're going to ask the legislature to enact a election integrity unit in state government. We're going to have investigators, law enforcement. If you see somebody doing something, whether it's villages, whether it's some other places, you can call this unit, you can call investigators, and this is all they're going to do. They're going to know the election code inside and out. They're going to be able to go, because I think what happens is there's different people in Florida that have seen things that look suspect, but they'll call their elections office, and the elections office is like, well, what am I supposed to, they're not investigators. I mean, they run the election. But then you can call a cop or a detective, and they have a lot of other fish to fry, so they may not be as acquainted with the election code. And some prosecutors don't like getting involved in this. So I think we have a way for this stuff for our code to be enforced in a way that makes a lot of sense, and in a way that will deter people from trying to pull a fast one. But I can tell you, we don't want to see the massive ballot harvesting that you see in some of these other states. That is not conducive for people to have confidence in what's going on. And one of the things I was proud of in Florida in 2020 is midnight on election night. We had about 99% of the votes that had already been counted by midnight on election night. You had some of these other states, they took days, weeks, and some even took months before they were able to count all their ballots. And here's the thing, even if nothing improper is going on in those 4 or 6 week period where they're still counting, people are going to look at that and say, well, wait a minute, this candidate was ahead on election night, and then you counted for 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden the other candidate wins. Even if nothing was done wrong, there's a lot of people that are going to be scratching their heads when that happens. So we really believe doing it in a way that's transparent, where the votes are tabulated and then the results are put out on election night, inspires a lot of confidence. And so we're looking forward to having a real strong legislative session building on some of the success that we've had with ensuring the integrity of our elections, and we're going to make sure that we do it going forward. But there's no
Okay, they actually cut it again. Don't know what to say. Sometimes the governor can get off on a tangent, but it was based on an asked question. There were, if for those of you that didn't hear the question, the last one, there was this issue down in the Villages, Florida, where they found 3, count them, 1, 2, 3, 3, registered Republicans apparently that voted more than once. Now, I'm not sure that in Florida, where Republicans took the last national election by 400,000 votes, if that made that big of a difference. But fraud is fraud, and you have to, admit it when you find it. So, and address it. And it does show, though, that there is a need. See, there was all this talk for about a year about how you couldn't even question elections. Well, okay, but that goes both ways. That goes both ways. So when they here now find it's Republicans, 3 older folks did some shenanigans, they aren't allowed to question. They're not allowed to question it, even those on the other side. You see, it's kind of a strange thing because people brought this up too. It's like, there were people on the other side questioning elections. Back in 2016, why was there no redaction and deletion and censorship and all this kind of stuff back then? So 2022 is when we reelect a governor in Florida next year. And that's really all we care about at this point. 2024 is irrelevant to Florida. Because as you can see, we have some secondary and tertiary effects of DC policy here in Florida, but really, in reality, there isn't anything DC can do to stop the direction we're going. There's nothing DC can do to stop the direction Florida is going. Because Florida is not just part of America, part of the USA. Florida is an international thing. Florida is a place where people from around the world go to, that they want to keep just like it is. So we have interests beyond just our own citizens. You see, everybody in North America loves to come vacation in Florida, but so do people in Russia, so do people in China, so do people in Brazil, so do people in Europe. They love Florida. They love coming to Florida. And so we could divorce from DC tomorrow, and we could stand up our own currency. It would probably be a bit of a headache for a while, but based on international support, we would be just fine. We would be just fine because of the amount of international money that comes here and supports our economy and keeps us going. And like I said, not many states have a $15 billion war chest right now. We have all sorts of money. And like the Florida State Guard logo says, let us alone. That's all it says. It says, let us alone. The Florida State Guard is not an expeditionary force. It's a defensive force. And while we don't fear anything from our Alabama neighbors to the north, we'll just have to kind of wait and see about Georgia and Atlanta. When they fix their problem, then we probably can rest easy knowing that we have allies where we need them to be. You know, we've got neighbors to our west, Mississippi and Louisiana, not too far, and we don't have much to worry about them, but that Atlanta issue, that needs taken care of. But anyway, so yeah, we got basically the vast majority of the conference, and I think the Florida channel cut their own feed based on the topic because they didn't want to run afoul of their own issues. So I will leave it there. But thanks everyone for hanging out. Part 2. It's been an interesting morning. Once again, working on a video that I really think is going to make it very clear about why you can't buy this bullshit from these Bitcoin pushers, because they truly are pirates. And some of them have gotten caught up in a scam that they don't even see themselves. And that's actually why I'm talking about it, because I know there's some good people and good and decent people out there that have just been snookered. They've just been snookered. And it's a hard thing. It's a really difficult thing because it went up so much in the last year, in 2021, that people out there, they have a big bunch of money invested in this. Meaning they're emotionally invested in it too. They, you know, it might be the biggest score of their lives. It's their Urca gold. It's their, you know, from the Black Sail series, the big ship all laden down with gold. You see, for Bitcoin is that for them, because I mean, it just went up like crazy. It's like 6-fold, 7-fold. You know, people who had $5,000 or $10,000 in it, you know, it changed their lives and allowed them to do things and pay off bills and buy cars and all this kind of stuff. And so they have an emotional attachment to it. It made people that normally sometimes make questionable decisions look like they're super smart. So, but unless they realize, okay, it's, you know, fine, you made some money, but get out of it, realize they're collapsing it. India arresting people, Russia banning it, China cracking down on it. The U.S. has said Biden has said we're going to start looking into bank accounts. And he hasn't said specifically why, but we're looking into bank accounts of people who have all of this income, all of this giant war chest of money that they aren't paying taxes on in dollars. In dollars. And that's what they're trying to look for. These, basically, people are turning the spigots on a little bit and pulling their Bitcoin money and turning it back into dollars and dumping it in their bank accounts in small amounts so that perhaps the IRS doesn't catch it as income. And that's what they're trying to look for. That's why they initially said $600. That's what they're looking for. People that are that had all that money put into Bitcoin and away and out of the sight of the tax man, built up this huge war chest, and now they're trying to turn their Bitcoin very quickly into dollars, into goods. Into dollars and then into goods. Just super fast. Which is fine, but it's still piracy, one way or the other. So anyway, I will leave it there. God bless. Have a great day, and there will be a video up here in probably an hour or two. We'll see you guys in a little bit. Take care.